Sal Capaccio will join us on the Wester Hotline right now. It is Jeremy and Joe. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Combine rolls along. We got a contract extension to talk about, other contracts to potentially speculate about. The GM speaking at the Combine. Workouts start tomorrow. I think that's when you can start to watch guys work out on the NFL Network. It's the Combine. It's the most wonderful time of the year. Good morning, Sal.
Good morning, guys. How are you?
Not too bad. Busy day yesterday, right? I mean, you expected to hear from Brandon Beane and kind of wrap up McDermott, what he had to say, move on to Brandon Beane, and lo and behold, Beane has a contract extension to talk about that I think most Bills fans are pretty happy about.
Yeah, the contract extension came down like within the hour before Brandon Beane, maybe even 20 minutes before Brandon Beane spoke to us. So I think that was probably, calculated by the Bills so that he could talk about it. It's good news. It's something he could talk about at the podium and answer questions about. So we got the news about the contract extension for Khalil Shakir, and obviously immediately when he spoke to the media, we asked him about it. And, it's interesting. There's a lot of guys here we've been talking about who are up for, extensions or at least going into the last year of their deals. He's one of 5 big names, I would say. And Brandon Beane said, look, you can't talk to everybody at the same time, but you have to kind of touch base with them, and then you kind of can talk with a couple to see where they go. And this one just started to really trend in, trend in the right direction. And they ultimately got to a place, that they were comfortable with. So, the reported numbers from Adam Schefter and others are 4 years, up to $60 million. Now, of course, we know how this works. The agents put out those numbers when they're high to give them the best look. And even if Khalil Shakir was to hit the $60 million, guys, that would be a maximum of $15 million a year. And if you hit that $60 million, I'm guessing that would be there's incentives and achievements in there. $15 million a year for a really good wide receiver is a nice deal. The guaranteed money is only 32, so you look at it that way. It's really a 4-year contract worth $32 million, and then whatever else he can make on top of that. And I think that's a nice spot to land for a core piece of the team who was their leading receiver last year, by the way.
Yeah, we might get the numbers on the deal today or in the coming days to find out if it's truly a 4-year deal or a 3-year deal with an out or whatever. There's lots of different ways they could do that. He could, up to 60 could be, what do we have in there, Sal? Like Pro Bowl escalators, catch escalators.
Sure.
Not likely to be earned incentives. He probably has one in there for 100 catches in a season where he gets $1 million or something like that. So we'll see what that ultimately plays out to be. How much of it, Sal, do you think is that Shakir, it just works? Like they don't really have to think too hard on this. And for Shakir to want to stay where he is, like this is a guy that they drafted. He kind of waited for his turn and developed, and he became a piece that the quarterback relies on. And if there's one thing that I think this team really values, it's if the quarterback likes you, you've got a really good situation going on.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jeremy. And of course, I think Khalil Shakir has really developed a nice rapport with Josh Allen. Look at his catch rate last year. He was leading the league at one point and really had like 99 or 100% catch rate at one point. And then that dipped a little bit as the year went on, and he got a little bit banged up. But, he's still able to, at his size and the way he plays, to stay healthy and be on the field, which was a key component, his availability as well. But, he's also one of these guys where what we've seen under McDermott and Beane the last, 7 years, the 3rd-year jump is big for a lot of guys. They go from year 2 to year 3, and that's really a lot of times the year where a lot of these players take that leap and they become a guy where you say, oh, that's somebody who you really want to, keep around. And that really happened with Khalil Shakir from last year, at the end of last year when things tailed off with Diggs and Khalil Shakir stepped up. Let's remember, his rookie year, he was inactive several games. And there were people saying, oh, this kid can't get on the field. And, that's why, remember our discussion on Keon Coleman yesterday. And you look at, and I understand Khalil Shakir was, a 4th-round pick, and Keon Coleman is the first pick of the 2nd round. They're a different situation, but when you think back to guys like Khalil Shakir who couldn't even get on the field his rookie year, and now they're signing him to a 4-year contract extension a couple of years later, it just shows to show you, there's time here for guys to develop. It doesn't have to happen right away, and it doesn't happen right away for everyone. So, I think the Bills, to your point, also know that this is a player that, fits their culture, fits their room. It's a player that wants to be in Buffalo. Khalil is a very, very grounded individual. He's a leader in his own way. I don't know if you know, he's a son of a military family. He's a guy that's always accountable at his locker, talking to the media. He's the type of player that's a captain without a C on his jersey, and that just all fits for the Bills, obviously.
Does anything come to mind, Sal, on like what he did grow in? Because he certainly grew. Like Coleman, I feel like this offseason it's been about like rebounding from the injury and maybe not being as aggressiveness, right? Was mentioned by McDermott after the year. For Shakir, like, is there something specific that comes to mind that he did take a big step in or grew in, or was it just a little of everything?
Probably a little everything, Joe. I think he's always been good with the ball in his hands. If you remember a few years ago, that game in Baltimore, we had a couple big plays with the ball in his hands. The Bills came back, they won the game on the walk-off field goal. That's something that's always been great. I think that the nuances of route running, separation, getting open. I think you've done some of the analytics work on this, Joe, this year, and Khalil Shakir's good at that, right? He's one of the guys that can actually get open and separate, and that's probably an area where he's been very good at, and he's grown, and it takes a lot to kind of learn that at the NFL level, and getting the ball and then being able to run with it is great, but you got to be able to be open to get the ball, and that's probably an area where he's really grown.
Sal Capaccio on the Western Hotline. What else did Brandon Beane have to say? James Cook's name came up, and he kind of had a glowing review of Cook in the same way that Sean McDermott did.
He did, and listen, I asked Brandon about James' situation, and James, I said, I understand you never negotiate through the media, but what's the process here of going through this, especially considering how public James has been via social media? And Brandon said 3 times before he even answered the question, really said, I love James Cook. He said, I love him. He's a great human being. And he said they want to keep James Cook. He said the business is the business and the value is the value. What James puts out there and what James says doesn't change the Bills' value on him. And he did say he prefers to keep business in-house. So he'd prefer that it not be out there public. But he also said that doesn't change their view of James personally. He said James is a grown man, and he can handle it the way he chooses to handle it. At the end of the day, he said, just because we're not on the same page now doesn't mean we won't be in 2 weeks, 2 months, or 2 years, right? Saying, hey, there's a lot of time here. So, yes, very glowing the way they talk about James Cook, but he made it clear we have a value, and it's like any other value we're going to have on a player. We have to adhere to what the market dictates, and there's a market, and they're going to look at that, and that's where the value is. They can't let what James Cook says alter what they feel about the value in the market of the player.
He got asked about the running back market a couple times, Sal, like about the more like the broader, the league scope with running back, and maybe this is not a dot worth connecting, but It did, I think both times when he got asked, he did talk about like Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, and the guys being able to play all 3 downs, weapons out of the backfield. And again, like, I don't know if this is a dot worth connecting, because Cook really wasn't all 3 downs, didn't get used in the pass game a ton. It was a good amount, but it wasn't like as much as some of those guys. I wonder, do you think that comes up for them? Like that he isn't really a player that's out there 70%, 80% of the time when they're trying to figure out whether to give him a good contract?
Oh, 100%, right? I mean, I'm sure the Bills, when they talk to James' representatives, one of the things that will come up is he's not really a third down guy for us. We have another guy who does that. Another thing that Brandon said, Joe, that I think I could tie to this is he was asked about running backs coming out this year and what traits they look for. And he brought up pass protection being very important. Does he understand pass protection? Does he understand how to diagnose this or that? And, let's go back to the Kansas City game. Many of us felt James Cook should have been on the field during the final drive. Why wasn't he? Well, one of the answers given at the end of the year was Ty Johnson's on the field for the 2-minute drill. Well, why is Ty Johnson on the field for the 2-minute drill generally for the Bills? He's good in pass protection, and he can go out and catch the ball. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean James Cook can't do those things, but he's not the best player in the roster for those things. So I'm sure in some capacity that's part of the conversation between Brandon Beane and James Cook's representatives when it comes time to discussing all of this.
Sal Capaccio on the Western Hotline ahead of the Combine. So it's funny, this time around for the Combine, there are a lot of, it feels like, you could tell me, remembering last year's Combine, it's a little bit more about the players they already have at least the conversations with the coach and the GM, than it is about the prospects. What did Bean have to say about the draft class this year, and whether it's the defensive line class being loaded, or putting things together, getting their team together, their scouts, everybody to start to pick through what they're looking for out of this group?
Well, specifically, he always says, hey, we pick 30th, and you never know how the board is going to fall. This is a good defensive line class. This is an area there. And, there's a lot of areas where the Bills are going to concentrate. And we asked specifically about positions. Like, do you need more at wide receiver? Do you need more at safety? They're not going to reveal all of those things. But he also talked about how as you get closer to the draft, obviously a lot of things change. There's trades that are made. Guys come here and they come here and they have these great workouts and they suddenly shoot up everybody's boards, right? So you have to kind of navigate that process. For the Bills, I will tell you, their process is tried and true for them. And people can pick apart the picks they've made and haven't made, and I understand that. But they believe in how they go about things, and it's pretty, set in, rooted in how, it goes back to going to see these players in games in college, and then going through the interview process with them up and through all the bowl games. And those are big, those bowl games and those interviews. And then when you get here, guys, it's interviews and medical are very, very important. I've always said the testing that's done here is great. It really confirms biases. It really confirms, I should say, what you already know about the player. If you see a player test here and it's way different than how you saw him perform, and Brandon Beane has said this in the past, that's when you go back and say, what did we miss? Is there something we missed on this? But generally, they're not going to be much different than what you know about them. So this week is mainly used for the other parts of it, getting to know them off the field, get these interviews, the medical piece of it, all that stuff is very important. And, that's something he makes sure that, people are aware of and how they go about it.
He does a very good job of not just giving away to what. It would be easy to say defensive line, it's a super deep class and there should be one by 30th. Being Jeremy said this earlier, he's very good at not really stepping in it in these things.
No, that's right. And Joe, we also usually get Brandon Beane about a week before the draft for an interview, a press conference, and that's when you get a little bit more of that when they know more about these guys, and they'll say, there's a good defensive line group, and I think there's some value there. And one of the things that's coming out of this combine is most of the value in this draft is going to be in the second and third rounds, and the Bills have 2 second-round picks this year. You're not getting the real high-end talent. I know we've debated about how people grade how many first-round picks. There's 32 teams, but as I always said to you guys, generally the way it works in the NFL is GMs will say they'll grade guys out at 20 first-round picks or 22, and I don't know. I think it's more on the lower end this year, or at least I would say the top elite guys I think are on the lower end this year.
I think you asked the question maybe about the idea of trading for a star player if your first round pick was involved, and not that you would expect the other from Beane, but definitely still not sounding like someone that would ever hesitate if you want my first round pick. He sounds like if the player's worth it, he'll do it.
So I know that he can't talk about specific players, right? And I said I understand you can't do that. He can't talk about Myles Garrett or Max Crosby or Micah Parsons, whoever. I said, but when you know a player might be available, what is that process like for you, and are you in on that? Are you making calls right away? And basically he said, look, I'm not doing my job if I'm not. Of course, I'm going to do everything that's possible to help the Buffalo Bills, but it's got to be the right deal for us. He said it's also important to remember for fans a lot of times, just because they don't make a trade doesn't mean they didn't try. They can't force a team to make a trade to them. That team could say, we're not trading him into the conference, in the division. We're not, we want to deal with another team. We want a higher draft pick. You're picking 30th. A lot of these things come into play. There's a lot of times they're in on conversations. They don't get guys. My question was backed up by Jay Skursky, who said, would that include trading a first-round pick? And Beane's exact quote was, I won't flinch. And he said, I'll say what I say when I'm on the golf course. I'm a lot of things, but scared ain't one of them. So, take that how you will. It feels like to me, and it sounds like the Bills are certainly at least checking in on some of these bigger names that we've talked about.
He is a good golfer, so that might be one of the reasons he's not scared out there.
That's right.
Being good would help. Well, Sal, the free agency happens first in the draft, so we'll know what they need more at the draft. Shakir's done. We're waiting for the other big ones. Cooper, Hollins, any early indicators on those guys?
No, I would be surprised if we get anything on Amari Cooper, anytime soon. I think that's a veteran who's probably, it's the first time he's going to enter free agency. And I'm sure that, he's probably looking to see, what that looks like for him. As far as Mac Hollins, I've always believed, and, I haven't heard anything this week specifically on him, but I at least have reason to believe that both sides would be very interested in a reunion, right?
Yeah.
And whether that happens this week or a little before free agency begins on March 12th at 4 p.m. The Bills are going to have to do some massaging. Brandon did reveal to us yesterday that even with the cap increase, which, by the way, it's going up from $255 to about $280, give or take a couple million here or there. I know, give or take a couple million. It's $277 to $281 is where it's going to fall, somewhere in there. He said even with that, the Bills are currently over the cap. Now, obviously, they have some roster management and massaging to do. They're going to get under the cap, but that just goes to show you, they still have decisions to make before they can even sign guys back to their roster. And, even if they do, those guys, when their contracts kick in on March 12th at 4 p.m., that's even more money the Bills are going to have to make sure that they have room for by making other moves.
Sal Capaccio with us. Did he get into Von, at least? Did I miss that? What the options might be for him this offseason?
So, interestingly enough, I would say both Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane were asked about Von Miller and whether or not, they think he'd be back in 2025. And neither answered that question directly.
Yeah.
But they both talked very glowingly about Von. Sean said that he felt that Von had a better year this year than he did last year. And Brandon Beane spoke very highly of what Von did with his contract last year. He said he took a pay cut that was even less than the guaranteed money he was supposed to get. And, he said that was really awesome and unselfish for him to do. Neither of them committed to what Von Miller's status will be with the Buffalo Bills in 2025.
I am going to continue to bang the drum. I think he should be back because, the two of them rave about him, whether it's McDermott, mental side, and mentally elite. Sal, you wonder, I know the business is the business. I heard Bean on with Chris and Steve on One Bills Live, and Brownie asked the question, can you go back to him and ask him to take less money again? You just did that. The relationships of it. You almost would wonder if Von redoing his deal and taking less last year would be another thing where, listen, he's in it for us, family guy, in the Bills family, all the things they say about James Cook and the things they say about Dawson Knox, about they bring more than just what they are. I think Von Miller fits that bill for them in terms of delivering more than just the player that he is, personally. And I know he's the biggest name, he's the cut candidate, but I think the avenue for him to come back is a good one.
I don't disagree. There's a very good argument there, Jeremy. I think there's really good arguments on both sides. And the other side is he's counting $23 million on your cap. And you'd have to really do something with that number. You can't live with that. I think that's for sure. However, how do you do that? And if it is a restructure and pay cut, that's way easier. If it's not, you're going to have to move on. And then does it become a June 1st cut where you're going to save $17 million, but not until June 1st? But does that open money for later making a trade? The trade doesn't have to happen now if someone wants something like that. Now, that being said, the other side of it is he played 16 snaps in the AFC Championship game. And as great as they feel he is, Von Miller, and how much he helps, I think that's speaking volumes to me about in those games, in those situations, like how much he's on the field and how can you justify bringing him back at whatever high price, if that's the case, at that number. To me, I don't disagree that everything you said is right about him bringing back, but it's got to be he'd have to, I think, really have to take a pretty large pay cut again.
In Indy, is there, because I'm assuming everyone else has arrived there after the Bills media, is there Kelsey whispers, Stafford? What are people talking about?
Kelsey's coming back, huh? That's the word.
Well, so I stood in on Andy Reid. I asked, by the way, I asked Andy Reid about the tush push, and I said, you were very successful against Buffalo, but what do you think about the play? And, he kind of didn't want to give he gave more of an indication that he's okay with the play.
No.
But he's like, it's a great play. It's a great play. It's really hard to stop. It was really interesting. Brett Veach talked and gave an indication, as you guys have said, that Travis Kelce will be back, whereas Andy Reid didn't really go as far as that. Nick Sirianni spoke yesterday, spoke very glowingly about his hometown of Jamestown, New York, Southwestern High School, shaping him, growing up. It was really cool. He was asked, I think, either by excuse me, Andy Young or John Scott, one or the other, about that. So it was great, to hear from that. As far as Stafford, I have asked some people in media circles who cover those teams, and I think you guys just talked about in the update.
Yeah.
I've also heard that Pittsburgh hasn't really been in on that. For Pittsburgh, it's trending more towards maybe Justin Fields or someone else, and not Russell Wilson next year. There is still a thought out there about the Giants. Joe Shane, I was standing his podium. He made a comment that I'm like, wow, that's crazy. He said the only quarterback on their roster right now is Tommy DeVito. Like, that's wow. You think about that, right? The Bills have 4 quarterbacks, including Josh Allen, on their roster.
I thought I saw Shane say something too that had Giants fans. I saw some Giants fans on social media like, "Oh, they're going after Stafford." I forgot what the quote was though, but Shane said something.
Yeah, I think that he just didn't rule out like how they want to go about doing this with a quarterback. And they did hire Chad Hall. Chad Hall is Matt Stafford's brother-in-law. Chad Hall is married to Matt Stafford's sister, and people are connecting the dots there that Stafford will go to New York. I'll give you another nugget, though, you guys can chew on a little bit here. I talked with some people last night, and there's a pretty good sentiment here that they think the kickoff touchback is going to move to the 35.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if it's going to happen, and I will say that nobody's sure for sure. But I know for a fact there was a 32-member special teams meeting last night. Every special teams coordinator was in a room last night in a meeting. And it was them all debating and arguing and talking. And there's a lot of heated opinions about this from these guys. And some of these guys are newer coordinators. Some of these guys are very long veteran coordinators. And they all have their opinions on this. And whether it's just the 35 or it's just how much they're changing the game and changing the rules and what they have to, go by, I'm just going to tell you that I think this is going to be on the table at the owners' meetings about moving the kickoff to the 35. The touchback, sorry.
Yeah. What's on the schedule for today, Sal?
Defensive linemen are going to start speaking at the podium. So I'll be down there. I'll be joining the guys in the Extra Point Show at 10 o'clock. We'll start to hear from them. Yesterday, you guys talked about Vinny Bonsignor talking about Matt Stafford. Interestingly enough, I did a really nice interview yesterday with Vinny Bonsignor of the Las Vegas Review-Journal and Raider Nation Radio. And the guys are going to play that on the Extra Point Show today. You guys have it. And I asked him a lot about Max Crosby and that situation. So I think Bills fans will want to hear about that. And, what the chances are of if the Raiders would actually move, Max Crosby. Talked with him. I got a chance to sit down with Andrew Siciliano, who's now the play-by-play guy for the Cleveland Browns, obviously, as of last year. We talked about their situation at quarterback. So you'll hear all of that on Extra Point Show, plus some other people I'll catch up with today. And then you're going to start to hear from some of the defensive linemen who are showing up today and hitting the podium.
Very good. Sal Capaccio, live from Indianapolis. Thanks, Sal.
You got it, guys.
Complete coverage. Extra Point Show coming up 10 o'clock today. A lot of the things Sal's talking about there.